On today's episode of Locked On Wild, is Vladimir Tarasenko a good buy low option or a player acquired too late?
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day as well. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we dive in to the acquisition of Vladimir Tarasenko from the Detroit Red Wings. We'll take a look at what Tarasenko brings to the table, whether or not this was a buy low opportunity for the Minnesota Wild, or if it was another in a long line of players acquired too late in their careers. We have a lot to get to on today's episode, so let's just go right with the big story. The Minnesota Wild adding a forward, Vladimir Tarasenko from the Detroit Red Wings for future considerations. Basically, what that means is the Minnesota Wilds take on the entirety of the Tarasenko contract, which is $4.75 million. And maybe at some point they will flip something to the Red Wings. But basically it's, hey, can you take this contract off our books? And that is what we like to say. That is that. That is how that deal basically goes. And for the Minnesota Wild, they are getting a player who's coming off of, well, one of his worst seasons in his NHL career. Now, we're going to get to the pros and cons here today. Don't worry. I'm just kind of painting the picture here. Tarasenko had 11 goals this past season, 33 points for a Detroit Red Wings team that started horribly, figured it out, and then fizzled. Tarasenko in his career has 304 goals, 662 points in 831 games. His average season over 82 games is 30 goals and 35 assists. But here's the rub. Tarasenko played 80 games this year. That is the first time that he has broken the 80 games mark since 2017-2018. Now, he's had other seasons where he's been close. 76 games in 2018-2019, 75 games in 2021-2022, 76 games in 2023-2024. So he's been close, and I basically consider anything 75 plus. I consider that a full season. Like you just don't get players by and large that play 82 games. They don't play the full season anymore. That's just not how the whole thing works. But Tarasenko, in the early part of his career with the St. Louis Blues, he was a write it down, book it, set your watch by it 30-goal scorer. He had 30 goals plus every season from 2014-2015 to 2018-2019. 37 goals, 40 goals, 39 goals, 33 goals, and 33 goals. Then he had a couple of injury-shortened seasons. He bounces back in 2021-2022 with 34 goals. And in 2023-2024, he has 23 combined goals between Ottawa and Florida. But it did not work in Detroit this past season. 11 goals. His shooting percentage was a career low for a full season, 8.3%. His total shot attempts were actually, 281 total shot attempts in 80 games was a pretty low point over the course of his last full seasons, almost 100 fewer than he usually takes. 133 shots on goal. So he shot less, he scored less, and in just reading some of the reaction to this during the day, everybody has pretty much come to the conclusion that he has clearly lost a step. And so I find myself looking at this in two different ways. Number one, as many have mentioned, and I'm not going to just dismiss this completely offhand, because there are two sides to this coin. Number one side, it costs you nothing to acquire Vladimir Tarasenko other than taking on the contract. So it's not like it's not like you're locking into a 4 or 5 year deal or even a 3 or a 4 year deal. He is a player who has a pretty long track record of being a goal scorer in the league. The Wild are buying pretty substantially on him being able to find at least some semblance of that form that he previously had. But on the other side of the coin, there is a reason that Detroit was willing to move on from him for nothing. And looking at the line combinations that he found himself with most last season, there just were not lines that scored goals. And I have concerns about the skating again and the injuries. You look at like the most common lines that Tarasenko was with. For instance, he had a line combination. He played 111 minutes with Lucas Raymond and Dylan Larkin, two pretty good players for the Red Wings, two of their top guys. He played 111 minutes with that combination, and they managed 3 goals for and 9 goals against. That's a 25% goals percentage in 19 games together. Tarasenko also played with several other teammates. So there was some line juggling that was going on. Jonathan Berggren, and let's look first at Marco Kasper. So it was Kasper, Berggren, and Tarasenko. That combination played in 136 minutes together. 3 goals for, 6 goals against. These line combinations both are under 2 goals per 60 minutes. If you go to Tarasenko, JT Comper, and Jonathan Berggren, that combination played 242 minutes together. They scored 7 goals for, 4 goals against in 35 games. 1.73 goals per 60 minutes. And I'm just looking for combinations that really jumped out that featured a Vladimir Tarasenko as part of the group. Now, a combination that played about 100 minutes and actually had some good things that they did. Andrew Kopp, Alex DeBrincat, and Vladimir Tarasenko, they averaged 3.24 goals per 60 minutes. But that was in under 100 minutes of ice time together. And it leads me to what I think has just been the number one point that we keep coming back to, and that I mentioned to the everydayers once the season finished, is that you can't Band-Aid the top 6. yes, this fills that spot with a body for this season and prevents you from having to commit long term to one of those names. But at the end of the season, you're exactly where you were. You're just a year older. And it's not a spot. It's not a spot that you can really. It's not a spot that you can really just continue to kind of cobble together. At some point, you are going to have to meaningfully address that spot. And the hope is that you have players on the roster that could turn into those types of players. So my initial reaction to this whole thing, which I'm sure is going to get eye rolls from many, is it's just more of the same. It's just more of the same that we've seen. And if Tarasenko recaptures his form, this has the potential to be pretty good. But if he doesn't buck the trend, then this is exactly where this team was at previously, just with a different player occupying that spot. So as of right now, daily face-off, the line combinations are all over the place. They have Tarasenko on the third line with Liam Ohgren and Ryan Hartman, and Marcus Johansson on the second line with Joel Eriksson and Matt Boldy. And like it's putting up a different topper on top of the Christmas tree. It may make things look a little different, but it's pretty much the same thing. So we're going to talk way more about this as the show unfolds, because we've got to talk about, like, if this isn't going to work, what do you have to do? And kind of what I think now is the plan going forward. So we'll discuss all that, as well as taking a look at what now is the plan going forward with Marco Rossi now that he has been tendered a qualifying offer. We'll continue today's episode of Locked On Wild right after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you are all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. My favorite part about FanDuel is the options. You can place a same-game parlay so that you can follow along with your favorite team all the way to the end. Or you can throw futures bets down. The Minnesota Vikings season is going to be getting going here before too long. You can throw a futures bet down on how you think the Vikings will do when their season gets rolling. The options are endless at FanDuel. So make sure to check FanDuel out right now. Open the app and visit FanDuel.com to get things started. New members will receive a $150 bonus if your first bet wins. Again, new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open FanDuel today and visit FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Of course, if there's anything that happens on the free agency market, more on that in a little bit. If there's anything that happens on the free agency market, we'll make sure to break it down in full detail for you. But I don't think there's going to be much. The Minnesota Wilds now are in the market for a bottom 6 center. That's about the only position of need that they have at this moment. But I want to talk about what makes a successful GM. And I know the financial flexibility has just come back to the Minnesota Wild. And so we are judging Bill Guerin on how this season goes going forward. But I got to tell you, like, Vladimir Tarasenko feels like a safe selection. A player who is a vet, a player who is going to give you, this standard jargon with veterans. They're going to give you a floor that's a little higher than a rookie, and you can expect a certain amount of performance from them on a night-to-night basis. But when you are already talking about how a player has lost a step before they even get in the building, how'd that work out with Gustav Nyquist? And general managers, you have to be willing to be bold. And honestly, like, before we dive into that, how about we just stop making these grandiose promises? Half of the things that I complain about on a daily basis are not even talking points, if not for the fact that they get put in print. Craig Leopold didn't have to say that July 1st was going to be like Christmas. He didn't have to say that at all. But it's out there, and it's not going to be. July 1st is not going to be Christmas for this team unless they pull off some massive trade that is going to require multiple moving parts in order to do. It's the same conversation we had about the 3 goalie system. The only reason that was a talking point was because at the beginning of the season, Bill Guerin said, we expect to carry 3 guys. If you don't say that, we're not talking about it. And so we just have all these foot in mouth situations. And now you've been building this up for the last 4 years. And now it's like, well, the prices were a little too expensive. Like, I promise you, we would not be talking about it as much as we were if not for the bulletin board material that keeps getting put out in the open. And if Vladimir Tarasenko works out, maybe he ends up getting signed to an extension. But guess what? You're betting then on a 34-year-old being able to continue to perform at that level. And we have been down that road far too many times already. This all but assures, unless Liam Ohgren straight up steals the job from him, this all but assures that Liam Ohgren will be in a bottom 6 role to start the season. That may not be the worst thing, but if let's say Marco Rossi, because the market has been very, very quiet for him, because all teams want to do is offer sheets. And at that point, if somebody offers Marco Rossi $6 million per, so your compensation would be a first and a third, you may as well match. You may as well match and hang on to him for that. And then if he's on the roster, what is the plan with Danila Yurov? Now, don't get me wrong. Having Marco Rossi on this roster is a good problem to have. That'd be the preferred problem of all of these that we have been discussing ad nauseum all off season. GM's tenure is not predicated entirely on a steady hand. Look at what Bill Zito did. Bill Zito, he had a President's Trophy winning franchise that got knocked out early in the playoffs. And he said, we got to do better. You have to be willing to be bold. And if the Minnesota Wild go into the season, make a massive swing at the trade deadline, and make that impact move, I've got a lot of crow to eat. But if it were me right now, looking at what we have, you got to prioritize the development of particular guys. They're going to get their chances on the roster in theory this year, which is great. And at the end of the year, you could be saying, boy, Liam Ohgren looks fantastic. Danila Yurov looks great. Those are two less spots that we have to worry about trying to fill. We can plug those guys in. And they're going to be big parts of our future going forward. That is the number one scenario that you're hoping for at this point. But if these moves don't work out and Tarasenko looks like he did for Detroit, you have the exact same problems you did last year. You got one line that can score. You got a second line that is not capable of it. And you've got guys on the third and fourth line in the exception of Ohgren and Yurov, wherever they slot in. They've got potential to be able to score, but by and large, you still have the same guys that are the same guys, minus Freddie Gaudreau. Bill Guerin preaches flexibility with all these moves, with getting rid of Freddie Gaudreau, with moving Declan Chisholm. He preaches flexibility. I think what we're going to do to finish today's episode is I am going to lay out what I would do if I were the GM. You know, it's easy for me to sit here and criticize, having no GM experience whatsoever. Put your money where your mouth is. So we'll put that to the test to finish today's episode of Locked On Wilds after this. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Once again, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe on YouTube so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. With free agency kicking up tomorrow in full gear, we'll keep you up to date on any moves that the Wild make. We'll also keep you up to date on how the rest of the Central Division does. We'll keep an eye on everything and we'll react to it once the dust has settled. But me, critical of what has been done to this roster while offering no substantial differences in options. Let's put that to the test. So if I'm the Minnesota Wild right now, with this roster that is put together, the next thing that's going to happen is going to be the offer sheets for Rossi. And we've known all along that the Wild have their number that they're looking at. And Rossi's team has the number that they want. And there's a divide. And you can't meet it. Teams have been unwilling to offer anything other than futures to this point, with the exception of prospects. That does not help the Minnesota Wild right now. So if it were me, anything under 7, and I match, and I say, we're matching this, anything under 7. If it is above 7, the first, the second, and the third come into play, I probably would do it at that point. If for some reason it goes to 8 or 9 and you get multiple first-round picks, then you drive him to that team yourself. But if it comes up to a certain point, I just match it. Because at this point, you get $12 million in cap space. 6 or 7 would still leave you $5 million to deal with. And at that point, if you add Rossi and you have Yurov on the roster, you may not need to go find a fourth line center. Because at that point, your center depth would be Rossi, Yurov, Ek, and Hartman. And I could be okay with Hartman being a bottom 6 center for this team. As far as the defensive side goes, maybe add one player that can sit in the AHL, can be called up if needed, but mostly just a veteran presence. They are working the crap out of that Iowa roster based off of the players that were not tendered qualifying offers today. So that roster is overseeing a major overhaul. And you see how the season goes. If you are out of it by the trade deadline, I feel like you have to take a swing. And if a team offer sheets Rossi at 7+, and you take that, you take the first, the second, and the third, you have 2 first-round picks, you have 3 seconds and 2/3, I think. And if you're out of it by the trade deadline and some other team, let's use the Buffalo Sabres, for example, some other team is out of it and has disgruntled players that don't want to be in that situation anymore, you got to take a swing. You have to do something that is going to pull you in the direction that you're trying to go. Free agency has rarely ever been the answer to solving a team's problems. You have to bid against other teams, and way more often than not, you have to go well above what they're offering. Brock Besser not coming here. And so it feels like it's time, and I don't feel crazy saying this. I feel like the next trade is going to be a pivotal one in Bill Guerin's tenure as GM. I'm not talking about a back-end trade line acquisition at the deadline. If things are going well for the Wild and they're in it at the trade deadline and you bolster however you feel you need to, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the trade that we have all been waiting for the last couple of years. That is going to bring in a piece to fit in the top 6 that is not just a Band-Aid, that is not just a stopgap, that is not just let's try this and hope this works. You have to meaningfully address that spot in the lineup, or we are going to continue to do this song and dance and continue to pull players in that are either past their prime or just flat out don't get it done. You have to meaningfully address the top 6. Because right now you've got Kirill Kaprizov, you've got Matt Boldy, and you've got Marco Rossi. Those are your future top 6 players. Matt Zuccarello is a fine placeholder right now, but this is likely going to be his final year in the NHL. So that's a spot that has to be filled. Vladimir Tarasenko's here on a 1-year deal. That's likely another spot that has to be filled. Joel Eriksson Ek, as much as we love him, playoff team, he's probably a third center. And he has capable of filling in admirably because of what he brings to the defensive side of the ice. He's filled in admirably in the top 6 for quite some time. But I'm talking like a meaningful addition to bolster that top 6 and slot everything in the way that it naturally should be. The kind that don't go to free agency, the kind that don't grow on trees, the kind that get fed up with where they are currently at and ask to go elsewhere. Your Jack Eichels, your Sam Reinhart's, your on down the line. Those players don't go to free agency. They're coveted position players. And so you got to be bold. You got to be bold to impact that spot. And so all eyes now to offer sheet mania. Because I got to say, if somebody offer sheets Rossi in the Wild, accept it. Down the middle is once again, it's back to being a problem. That could offer some solutions with Danila Yurov. He could certainly plug that gap, but you don't really have a backup plan if those options don't work. And I guess my whole scope of just what we have seen from this team is it felt like it could have been way more planned out than it has been. Feels like this could all have been laid out in a thoughtful manner. And a lot of this could have just fallen into place naturally. It's like when somebody asks you how your project is coming along, how your book report's doing, and you haven't read the book yet, and you're like, "Oh, yeah, it's going fine. It's going okay." What are you doing for your project? Oh, well, we're gonna do a little of this. We're gonna do a little of this, and you just kind of make it up as you go. That's not the way to do it as a general manager. So we'll see what happens. But as we continue to mention here at Locked On Wild, this team is never dull. There's always something going on. So thanks for tuning into today's episode. We'll keep you in tune. We'll probably record tomorrow's episode a little later in the day just to see how things play out on the offer sheet front. We don't know how any of this process is going to work, so probably going to record a little later in the day just so that if anything does happen, we get a chance to kind of take it in. But make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We've got new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.